And presumably it's going to go live to both LinkedIn and to Zoom at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay, I think I've got part of the solution here.
I feel like it hasn't started yet.
I think you're right, though. Let's think here. Okay, we are live on LinkedIn now, so that's good. So at least we have half the problem solved. Then let me go ahead and go to YouTube, and we'll start that in a second, and then we should be good to go. My apologies, everybody. We're running into some technical difficulties as we're trying to set up both YouTube and LinkedIn for today's Delta Lake Community Office Hours. Give us a couple more minutes to go ahead and get ourselves up and running, and then we will go ahead and answer your questions. Okay, cool. So I think we're also live on YouTube now. So perfect. All right. Well, perfect. I think we're good to go in terms of being live. I'm going to add Tyler as a panelist as well. Okay. And so, hey, Tyler, hopefully you should be able to join us in a second. Do you hear us now, Tyler? Okay. I'm not sure what I'm hearing, but it's okay. But we're on LinkedIn now. Okay, perfect. All right. And Tyler, you can unmute yourself when you get a chance. So currently, hi, everybody. My name is Denny Lee. I'm a developer advocate here at Databricks. We've got ourselves a fun little next, 20 minutes or so, Delta Lake Community Office Hours. With me are Scott, Tyler, and TD. I want you to introduce yourselves. I'll go in that order that I just said. Scott, why don't you introduce yourself real quick?
Cool. Hi, everyone. My name is Scott. I'm a software engineer on the Delta ecosystem here at Databricks. Here to answer people's questions. My main focus the past couple of months has been on the connector ecosystem we have, specifically the standalone writer. TD?
Perfect. Yeah, TD.
Okay. Hi, I'm TD. I'm a staff engineer in Databricks. I've been involved with Spark structure streaming and Delta Lake project since the beginning. Currently also in the Delta ecosystem team, working on connector stuff. Scott is the one who does all the work. I'm the pretty face helping around people.
No problem. Tyler, can you hear us now, or can you speak now? Because you were muted before, at least. All right. I'm going to assume at some point Tyler will be able to join, but just in case, if he can join, that would be Tyler Croy. He is a data engineering manager over at Scribd. And yes, we see you, but we can't actually hear you, buddy. Yeah, I don't know. Like, you're unmuted too. That's the brutal thing. So, okay. Well, you're back on mute. So whenever you can come back online, that'd be great. Maybe we'll explain. We'll try to toss the questions back to you if anybody asks them. So just to get the ball rolling, we did actually have a question from Vineeth, excuse me, about explaining the new features. Vineeth, I'm going to have to turn it around and ask you maybe what new features are you referring to? Are you talking about what's coming up in Delta 1.1? Are you talking about currently the Delta Lake 1.0 set of stuff? Oh, there we go. Tyler, we can hear you, I think.
I don't understand. I have no idea how this works.
Now it works. Now it works.
But it works now. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're in. It's okay, buddy.
Just hold the mic a little bit closer. I think your mic's volume is a little bit low.
I will speak into my little hand mic.
There it is. All good.
Boom. All right. So meanwhile, I'm as your host, because I don't actually know anything at all anyways, basically I'm going to be looking at both LinkedIn and YouTube to see if we have any questions from everybody. But looks like we are live on YouTube and on and LinkedIn. So first, like I said before, first questions from Vineeth. And Vineeth, if you can go ahead and get back to us on which set of features you were referring to in terms of Delta Lake 1.1 or Delta Lake 1.0, anything else. Now, saying this, One thing I definitely would love to go ahead and have us go round the horn in terms of the current set of features and what's coming would be things like the Delta standalone writer, also for the Flink and Delta Sync. And then for you, Tyler, anything, especially from yesterday's, 2 days ago's Delta Rust session, like any updates that you want to call for that. So why don't we do those things first while anybody else here on LinkedIn or YouTube, if you've got questions, please, again, chime them in on exactly what type of features, or just be a little bit more specific so we know how to answer the questions. So for you, Scott, first I want to ask you a little bit more. What's the current state of the Delta standalone writer? Just because I saw a whole bunch of pull requests. There was a lot of code. So can you tell me a little bit about what's going on here?
Yeah, we are basically at code completion. So today or tomorrow, we're going to be merging it into the master branch, which is awesome. So people can go and see the GitHub issue and the GitHub PR if they want to comment on any of it. The issue also points to the public design doc if they want to see the overall design of the standalone writer. But yeah, being merged tomorrow, which is great. Really excited. And the next couple of weeks will be QA just to validate it, make sure it works with our existing connectors like Hive, for example.
Excellent, excellent. And Scott, one thing I definitely want to call out is like this actual is not just for like a standalone writer by itself and for the Java and Scala clients, and also eventually for the Hive, upcoming Hive 3. But don't forget, we all have any system that wants to write to Delta Lake, in fact, can go ahead and leverage that if it's not leveraging the Delta Rust API. Yes, I know you want to say that too, Tyler. So nevertheless, saying that, there are things, for example, like what was recently published in AWS Labs Athena. There's the Athena connector that actually uses the Delta standalone reader, for example. And then a natural segue would be the Flink Delta Sync. And TD, why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, this is very exciting stuff we are doing in collaboration with the Verberica folks from Flink that we are building using this Delta standalone writer, a Flink Delta Sync, so that any Flink pipelines can write out to Delta tables exactly in the same way how you can use structure streaming to write out Delta tables. You will be able to use Flink to write out to Delta tables, which expands the ecosystem around Delta Lake a lot. That they're like the two major streaming engines out there, both can write out to Delta tables. And this is just the beginning. I think going forward over the next quite a few months, we're going to slowly build the Flink Delta source using the Delta standalone reader, etc., etc. So we are really focused on increasing this ecosystem of making every possible engine being able to read and write into Delta tables.
Awesome.
Danny?
Perfect. Thank you very much. So
is.
now, my apologies. Basically, it was a bit of a blip on this one. Thank you very much. And so now, naturally, I'm going to segue over to Tyler. Tyler, want some quick updates from the Delta Rust side of the house, especially with the productionization of Kafka Delta Ingest? What are the new plans that I think the community would love to learn about?
Yeah, so someone actually asked in Slack about this morning, but Kafka Delta Ingest is running in production at Scribd, which is super cool. And Kafka Delta Ingest, if you're not familiar with it, it's a Rust daemon that basically brings data from Kafka, JSON formatted data right now, from Kafka into Delta tables with an extremely low overhead and an extremely low footprint at runtime, which is super cool. We had our open development meeting, which was recorded on YouTube earlier this week, and a couple of things that we had talked about. Probably the most notable is we're getting ready to do a new release of the Delta Lake Rust crate. We haven't done a release in a few months because we've been pinning to basically development versions of the Apache Arrow Rust binding because we've been working with the Arrow community to get improvements for writer support in over the last few months. Now they have cut their 6.0 release to crates.io, which means we can now cut our release. The other thing that we talked a little bit about, which is really exciting, but I can't commit to any timelines because it's not mine to commit to. There's finally movement happening around the Azure SDK for Rust, which has never been released to crates.io. So now there's word on the grapevine is there's some movement within Microsoft to start to push that along to crates.io. And once that binding gets released, that means that we can start to ship a Delta Lake crate that is enabled with Azure. So every Delta Lake crate that we've released has actually just been AWS file system. And I think we have not yet released the Google Cloud Storage support, but we can release that with this next release of the crate. But we've had to exclude
Very
the
nice.
Azure SDK stuff, which will mean that as a primitive, the Delta Lake crate will, at that point, no timeline on that part, but that at that point we would be able to, as a Rust user, enable a different compile time feature flag in order to have Azure ADSL G2, whatever the hell it's called, support plus
ADLS,
Yeah,
ADLS.
ADLS Gen 2.
Azure Data Lake.
Yeah.
Data Lake storage.
Storage.
S3 support
Yeah.
plus Google Cloud Storage. So those were a couple of the major things that were talked about. One of the things that's landed in Kafka Delta Ingest, which we've been experimenting with recently, is the support to start Kafka Delta Ingest from a specific offset in Kafka, which is really exciting if you're moving from an existing system that's already processing data into Delta Lake. Then you would be able to stop that old system and then start up Kafka Delta Ingest and pick up right where you left off in Kafka, which is exciting, to say the least.
Okay, can I ask a bit of nerdy questions here? I'm very
how absolutely.
do you? Yes, how do you manage the offset? Like, how do you Is it exactly once guarantee, and how do you manage those offsets and checkpointing and stuff in that Kafka Delta Ingest stuff?
Let's see if I can butcher this response, because I don't have firsthand knowledge for developing this. Christian, who did a good segment with Denny and I week before last, or October 7th, I remember, is when we talked about that. We do, the way that we run Kafka is for that exactly once semantic, and there's a broker level configuration that you can do there. But what we do in order to allow some of the coordination between Kafka Delta Ingest consumers that are consuming from data and then consuming data and writing it to Delta, we're actually using the Delta transaction, the TXN action, to store offsets in the Delta transaction log, so that any other writer can know sort of who's at what offset on what partition without needing some sort of third-party coordination. And that design was actually created or come up with by QP, who is the originator of the Delta RS Rust bindings. He's another member of my team here at Scribd. And it is so cool that we were able to just like our dependencies for Kafka Delta Ingest are pretty much DynamoDB for locking to make sure that we have some concurrent writes into S3, because S3 has problems with concurrent writes. But then outside of that, it's just Kafka Delta Ingest, and then the Delta table. And so it's a very simple architectural setup, which is really cool because we're able to hijack or utilize the Delta transaction log for a lot of what we're doing.
Yeah, it's very, very cool. It's so very cool that, how you use the set transaction to keep track of per partition offsets in the log itself. That is very cool. It is something that we hadn't thought of earlier. So kudos to you folks.
All right. Definitely, and then this is a good call out. That don't forget, exactly what Tyler called out on October 7th, which is about 2 weeks ago now, I guess. Myself, Tyler, and Christian, we actually went through in some of the details. So if you want to learn more about Kafka Delta Ingest, that's the best way to do it. Meanwhile, I did want to go ahead and actually call it one thing before I did switch back over to LinkedIn. So if you LinkedIn or YouTube for that matter, go ahead and keep on subscribing to our Delta Lake YouTube channel. Or ask questions here on the Databricks LinkedIn, keep on chiming in with any of your questions. I've got a couple more questions that showed up, but I did want to call out one other thing, which was pretty important, which is the Presto Delta Reader. So we're actually working with a bunch of the folks in the community. Specifically, I'm going to call out Ahana in this case. They're helping us to work to basically get the Presto Delta Reader to work in a performant, not just in a cool manner, but also a performant manner, all OSS. So for the community. So we're going to be pushing out the pull request on that. Actually, the pull request is actually already out. It's actually already public. Sorry, my bad. We're going to start community office hours. That's what I was trying to say. Probably the next 2 to 3 weeks. We're just trying to get the schedule nailed down. But we're going to be starting community office hours for specifically the Presto Delta connector as well. Just like the ones we already have for the Delta Rust, just like the ones we already have for Flink for Delta. Now we're also going to do this one for Presto. So woohoo! Okay, and now we're going to switch to questions. One is just a shameless plug for us here at Databricks. James called out that they love the new landing page for Databricks. So yes, thank you very much. That's awesome. But I believe none of us are responsible for that one. But nevertheless, thank you very much. Okay. So, but the first question, and I think this will be directed toward you, TD, in this case is, what are the best effective ways to merge or update data into a Delta Lake table when we're receiving new data for the table in the raw zone? Okay, that's a question from Kinjal, I believe.
All right. So
yes, there's a lot to this. So yeah,
there's a lot, and let me slowly unpack it. So let me interpret your question. So basically, you have data, change data, where your row level changes coming in and the raw layer, and you want to upsert those row level changes or apply them to the Delta table. If my understanding of the question is correct, then the best way to do this is essentially use structure streaming. So structure streaming can read from arbitrary different sources, right? And so you can read the change data from using structure streaming. And then structure streaming has this sink called for each batch, where what it does is that it gives you, basically you can, using the streaming query standard data frame transformations, you can parse the change data from whichever format you're coming from and parse it out and present it have it in the same schema as the actual Delta table. And for each batch exposes each micro batch of that parsed data as a data set. And then you can apply merge, the SQL operation merge on top of each of this set of changes and apply it on the Delta Lake table. You have to do a little bit of, keep in mind that you have to deal with a little bit of things like there might be duplicate, the single micro batch can have duplicate changes for the same key, etc. So you have to dedupe it, otherwise merge will not work because merge assumes that there's only one match, and there are tiny bit of complications here and there that you have to think about and do the deduping and stuff. But once you get all of that set up, structure streaming, read changes for each batch after parsing merge on the Delta table, you have the end-to-end change data capture pipeline continuously updating the Delta table. Now, if you want to learn more about it, take a look at the merge operation docs in the Delta IO docs, which has a very succinct example of how you can do this merge operation with a very simple dedupe operation right there itself. I mean, that's a good starting point for you to try out and play around with this idea.
Excellent. Thanks very much, TD. And one quick call out, which admittedly enough is probably another shameless plug. There is a session called Diving into Delta Lake Tech Talk series, where basically we talk about unpacking the transition log, enforcing and evolving the schema. And we also happen to have a DML internals on delete, update, and of course, merge. I'm actually going to paste that page directly to LinkedIn because that's where it actually came from. The reason it's a shameless plug because it happens to be TD and myself that actually did that session. So just as a quick call out. So. All right. So nevertheless, saying this, we're almost done for today's set of questions. So I did want to actually just ask one more question before we wrap it up, which is a little bit more on Delta Lake 1.1, TD or Scott, for that matter. Just a quick ask, like, do you think it's the rough timeline for Delta 1.1? Because we've got some questions about Spark 3.2 support. So that's the reason why I wanted to call that out. Yes.
Okay. Let me talk about the Delta 1.1 stuff, and Scott then can pick up on the Delta standalone writer and the Flink related stuff. So those are two different Maven artifacts, therefore two different Maven release timelines. Let me talk about the Delta Lake 1.1. So Delta Lake 1.1 is going to be on Spark 3.2. Spark 3.2 got released and announced just a couple of weeks back. We are in the process of doing the final round of QA and testing after updating to Spark 3.2. So expect in about next 2-3 weeks, so say mid-November or second or third week of November, we should have made a Delta 1.1 release on Spark 3.2. So that's it on the Spark Delta support side. Scott, take away about the standalone stuff, non-Spark stuff.
Yep. The standalone writer we are hoping to release in November. So by the end of November is the goal. And then the Flink connector, we will see beyond that. It might take a couple more extra weeks of QA just to verify functionality, but coming along very well.
Yeah. So the release of the standalone writer and with also will include some improvements to the standalone reader that will help improve the memory usage of reading a delta log, reading the delta table, of parsing the delta log and stuff. Those all will be released as a single release, which we can take advantage in the other subsequent connectors like Presto, etc., which that we are also building. Presto reader and the Flink sync, which uses the writer. So a lot of improvements coming along.
So I've got a follow-up question for you, TD.
Go for
We
it.
now have Delta Reader in Rust, in Java and Spark, and a Delta Writer in Rust and Java and Spark.
Yes.
How, as the most bearded among us, how will we coordinate the compatibility between all of these in a way that is going to make sense? Because I mean, this is very, very new in the Delta community, and we need to maintain some form of adherence to compatibility between these.
That is a absolutely fantastic question. And finally, somebody's giving me the hard questions. I was getting tired of Denny giving me all the low balls. Okay. Yes, you have absolutely correctly identified that this is a hard challenge that we are have to deal with. Right now, since the whole Delta Lake stuff started with Spark to begin with, I think that is our highest priority to maintain the compatibility. And that's why we are building all of these connectors like the standalone, etc. stuff independent without touching the main Delta project, because we do not want to affect the robustness of that. And so now going forward, yes, as we make the standalone reader, writer, some of these more robust, we are thinking of figuring out how different common pieces can be pulled out as separate common Maven artifacts and shared across stuff. Like one of the things that we are thinking of, like kind of looking a little bit forward, thinking well into the next year, is that like the storage support, which is for us in the Delta Lake Spark side used to be the log store. We are adding essentially similar APIs in the standalone, but right now independent, like kind of duplicating the APIs. But going forward, we definitely want to refactor it so that the same log store implementation can be commonly used for Delta Spark as well as Delta standalone and any connector using the Delta standalone. So those are some of the refactorings we have in the plan that we're going to slowly keep doing to kind of minimize the code duplication, both from our maintainability point of view as well as from the user configuration, ease of use point of view as well. The less moving parts there are, the less duplication there are, the easier for the user to configure and use, ideally not configure at all, and less things to break. So yeah, this is definitely a hard problem, and we are going to tackle it slowly by refactoring it in a piecemeal fashion without affecting the robustness of some of the more robust projects at all. But yes, this answers. Sorry.
Keep going, TD.
Yeah, so this answers the Java side of things. I think for the Rust side of things is definitely something we should have further conversations on. How do we work towards making the maintenance overhead of this lower across multiple projects? So yes, Tyler, looking forward to those conversations. Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, what I was just going to add on is there's like development compatibility between the different like projects we are producing, and then there's actual data correctness compatibility. And I just want to assure people that the data that you write with all these different writers and data that you read with all these different readers, like it's still valid data. We're still adhering to the Delta protocol, you know?
Yes.
And different readers may have different functionalities, and those are correctly specified using the Delta actual protocol that's metadata in the table. And over time, as we add more features to the Delta OSS and to the standalone reader and writer, you know, we'll be bumping the actual protocol that they use to maintain actual read and write compatibility between them.
Yeah. So the protocol already contains enough information for us to judge whether version X of writer 1 is compatible with version Y of reader writer 2 and stuff. So the protocol already supports that. And I think that will be the way by which we will guarantee the compatibility or incompatibility whenever we make breaking changes that needs version upgrades and stuff. So that is something that that is baked into the protocol, and it's our job to guarantee that if readers at the same version level will be absolutely compatible with each other, whichever project you use to read write those tables.
All right, perfect. First of all, TD, I want to take particular offense. It's hard for me to make sure I give you only the lowball questions. There's actual work on my part, but nevertheless, no, in all seriousness, if you actually have more questions about the Delta protocol, the one thing that I definitely would like everybody here to do, join us at delta.io. Join us on Slack. We're all here. All of us that you see here, we're actually typically interacting with everybody. So if you want to dive into these details, whether it's the Rust API, whether it's Delta Spark, the standalone writers, or the protocol itself, please, we encourage you to join us on Slack. And for that matter, we'll be doing these office hours every 2 weeks as it is anyways. So that's it for everybody. I think we're a little late, so I'm going to shut it down now. If there are any more questions, again, join us on Slack and we'll answer your questions there. Otherwise, join us for the next community office hours. It'll be in 2 weeks at 9 a.m. Pacific. All right. Thanks very much, everybody. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Denny. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.